בגט המוות לא ייראה. גם כי ילך בגט המוות לא ייראה. לא, 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 לא ייראה, כי אתה עמדי. לא, 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 לא ייראה, כי אתה עמדי. וגם כי אלך בגט המוות לא ייראה. וגם כי אלך בגט המוות לא ייראה. לא, 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 לא ייראה, כי אתה עמדי. אלוהי, 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 ייראה, כי אתה עמדי.
We're here today to honor, commemorate, and bid a farewell to the sweetest guy I know, Louis Ash. Lou and Gringo, Leib Ben-Sion, his parents and siblings Lucito, our mothers Pichungo, my sisters and my daddy, our children's Poppy. The challenge of using words to describe a man whose life and love was so defined by action feels daunting. I stand here with my grief building by the hour, tired and spent, because as my mother said to me yesterday, other people talk about what they would have done or what they should have done. We did it. My mother Adela, my sisters Anita and Evie, their husbands Ari and Ellie, myself, my co-parent and best friend Abigail, our children Shlomo, Yehuda, BINYAMIN, Tamar, Yonatan, Rose, Wolf, Elizabeth, and Jacob have spent the last year doing everything we could to surround this beloved man with honor and with dignity, with good humor and compassion, with our creativity and our energy, with our problem-solving skills and consolation, with our comfort and whatever little listening skills we may or may not possess, but most of all, our love. Because more than anything else, we love this man. We love you. As you completed your time with us here, you did nothing less than bring out the best in all of us, as individuals and as a unit. To be sure, our family has always put service at the forefront of what matters most to us, but it's never been this level of collaboration, sustained effort, and mutual support. We may not be ready for you to go, but the fact of the matter is you completed us. You did your job and you did it exceptionally well. To get a sense of who my father was, you need to look no further than his many books of journal entries. Dad was a creature of habit, sometimes a bit idiosyncratic, sometimes a lot idiosyncratic. One of his habits was recording the mileage, location, and time, and sometimes weather, of everywhere he drove. They say if you want to know where you're going, you need to look at where you've been. And if you go through his notebooks, you'll see where my dad has been. West 86th Street to visit BERMAN's Big and Small during the Jewish Center years. Pelham Parkway North to drop me off, pick me up, and drop me off again at Josh's house for another sleepover. Main Street in Queens to buy that good kosher meat they have at Bracht's. NCSY meetings, Queens College, anywhere Anita, myself, or Evie needed to be. Sometimes it was 4:06 p.m., 34 degrees and sunny. He would take my mother for coffee and bagels, their standing date spot. Children's Place, so my mom could shop for clothes for her grandkids. he would patiently wait in the car, listening to classical music or whatever else he did in the car, waiting to drive back that day's haul of kids' clothes and bargains. Driving Vivi and Altabubby to doctor's appointments, bar mitzvahs, brisses, etc., etc. And then to Brock's again because they had the good kosher meat. Trips to the circus, trips to the aquarium, New Rock City, Throgs Neck Bridge, Whitestone Bridge, George Washington Bridge, JFK airport arrivals, JFK departures, Costco, Linden Place, etc., etc., etc. Each trip my father took on our behalf was an investment. Each entry, another line item in a ledger that grew and grew. And what a portfolio he put together. As time clocked mileage on him, he used that mileage on us, which brought us to where we are standing here today. My father was a facilitator and an enabler. Sure, it consumed incredible amounts of time and energy being the captain of a family, but it's so much cooler than stamp collecting. For the life of me, I don't know why he did it, but he did. But as my father would always say, when a satisfying explanation would elude him, he would say, "I'm Cubano, what's your excuse?" I'm very fortunate to have a close relationship with both of my children, which I also was modeled on how my father was with us kids. Of the roles I played in life, being a father is the one I cherish most of all. And I often tell Rosie and Wolfie that many of the positive qualities and habits that come through me as a father are actually me doing my best impression of my own dad. Poppy was one of the funniest and most playful men you ever met. His ability to engage with children was second to none. A chess master, a doodling dynamo, and an arm wrestling champion all rolled into one. A hilarious storyteller, with even more hilarious voices to go with those stories. The man who made the monkey guy famous. To this day, the uncomfortable silence between ritual hand washing and eating bread is more often than not filled with someone in our family doing a cover of Dad's signature fist pound and hand flip. Da 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 da, da 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 da, da 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 da, etc. We had the delight of collecting and illustrating my father's myriad of isms over the last year and change with the Emoji Project. A project where we took my father's favorite catchphrases and some other family members' catchphrases and created unique and original emojis to go with it. And I'll tell you, there isn't a sitcom character in history that had more catchphrases with this man. It started out that we thought it was going to be like 2 or 3 or 4 things. I think it ended up like 70, something like that. It's crazy. Some of my happiest places and memories are with my dad, going to the city cinema or the Allerton Theater or to the Valentine Theater in a not so great neighborhood to watch some sci-fi flick or horror movie or other lunatic cinematic atrocity. Show of hands, who here got to see the R-rated American Werewolf in London during its original 1981 theatrical release when they were 6 years old? Show of hands? Well, it's just me, and I guess I'm luckier than you are. Thanks, Dad. You indulged my weirdo interests as a kid, and I think you found in me a partner to do the same. Things that we do for people that we love has the ability to make a lasting imprint on their minds, hearts, and souls. It's powerful stuff that we should not hold back on or be stingy with. What we have been given in this life, we should give freely. It's what Louis Ashe did, and it's what brought us here today. My many conversations with Anita and Ari over the past few months, we've talked about this idea of what growing and aging and ultimately dying is, and how it connects to the natural world around us, and more ethereally, the spiritual world inside, outside us, and the universe at large. I personally have come to feel that good qualities that exist come together to be a corporal man. And in time, those qualities are released back into the world for other people to chase, catch, and embody and pass on to the next corporal being. I like to think that my dad's life of 82 wonderful years and its painful but meaningful end can be seen in the same light. He was given wonderful qualities that predated his birth. He embodied those to the fullest, passed them on, and now he is released. The essence of who he is, he will always be the sweetest guy I know. My father's nickname for me was Tati Boy, well, one of the nicknames he had. Another way of saying father, son, because my Hebrew name is Ben Sion, which was his father's name. Tati Boy is another way of saying father, son. I didn't realize it when I was more boy than Tati, but now that I'm more Tati than boy, it resonates for me in a really powerful way. The last words he spoke to me on his last day, he said to me in a whisper, he said to me, "You're the big guy," he whispered to me. I'm going to try to be the big guy. I don't think I can do it quite the way that you did, but I think there's enough of you in me and in all of us, in my family and everyone here today, that we're going to carry on those qualities that made you who you were and comprise your good name. I ran out of time before being able to finish this, but I just want to take a moment to really acknowledge my mother, who I had the incredible pleasure of witnessing how she took care of my father throughout this year when things were, hard news, but things were up and moving around till the very end. The sweetness, the love, the romance between these two it was just an exceptional thing to see. The way you guys adore each other is so unique and so wonderful, and as good a care as any of us were able to take with him at times. Inevitably, every visit eventually would be, "Where's your mother? Do you want me to go get her? Bring her in." And then you lean down with mom and he'd go like this, "Do you want me to leave?" "Yeah." So there's no question who her number one was, and there's no question who his number one was. And to get to witness this and be part of it was such a wonderful thing. Also just want to acknowledge my sisters, who really have been superheroes through this entire thing. In the first months of COVID, when my children and I could not come out to visit because no one was getting on planes, they would have regular gatherings in Evie and Ellie's backyard, and I would get to have these FaceTime meetings where it would be hard to see everyone because everyone was about 12 feet apart, but you get these wonderful panoramas of everyone together and doing things. And we had sikkahs together, and later on we were able to last summer do a Cuban night where we did a giant feast together, where we ate gringo versions of really good authentic Cuban food. And Anita and Ari, honestly, for how much you enabled the incredible care that he received, both with the doctors and hospitals, but also uniquely one-on-one, constantly advocating, tirelessly being there. As lucky as you are to have had him as a father, guys, he is really lucky to have you guys as his daughters. Anyway, thank you all very much for being here. Really appreciate you guys. Thank you.
And let me just add how proud Poppy was of his son Brian, who, as he told me many times, he's just kept so much nachas and so much joy. And Brian cared for him so deeply and profoundly all throughout this time, and certainly in the last period of time. And our whole family is indebted and enormously appreciative.
I really can't believe that we're at Poppy's funeral. When we heard he had cancer, we were obviously shocked. But when we heard he had the rarest of the cancers, you're like, if Poppy was gonna get cancer, he was gonna get the rarest of the cancers. We were even scared for the cancer itself when he got it. Like that's what he was to us. He was like a superhero. It was. So I wanted to share one of the last real conversations I've had with him. Happened a couple of months ago. It's at a time where he could barely sit down, let alone stand up. So it's not really much to be talking about. But we like to joke around a bit. So I asked him, "How's the working out going?" It's always a fun starter. And he said, a couple of times a day, I take 2 cans of beans and I lift them and do my workout. And it's funny because normally with somebody in his situation who works out, who's doing a workout, they could be prideful about it, that they're suffering like crazy, but they're putting in the work. but he was embarrassed. He was embarrassed that what he was lifting were beans. That's what he was embarrassed about. So he asked me if I heard of this sentence in Spanish. He said, hacer todo lo que se pueda, which translates to do what you can, or do everything you can. And what he was trying to say is, I'm in a bad situation, but I could do this. It's not easy, but you have to put in the work. When I heard that, I was obviously tears in my eyes. I told him exactly why. That's why one of the big reasons why he's my role model. And there's so much more things, but I'm not going to take up all of the time. But I just wanted to get to that point where he really was, he tried to teach, know what's right for you. And even if your body tells you, if you're in pain or anything, put in the work, do what you can do. Hacer todo lo que se pueda. So hopefully we all could be able to do that. And basically that's what I just wanted to share with you guys.
Papi was also a proud brother of Mirta and Haima, and a proud uncle. And we asked one of his nephews, Nate, to share a couple of words.
I just want to say it's very hard for me to speak and do Uncle Louis justice. And I feel similar to my mother. Some part of him was inscrutable, but the defining qualities that I always observed with Uncle Louis were simplicity, sincerity, positivity, kindness to others, a quick-witted and good-natured sense of humor, humility, and a great understated intelligence. In short, Leib, meaning heart. Louis's Hebrew and Yiddish name Leib was divinely ordained to encapsulate his big heart. These are qualities that Judaism teaches us to strive for, and these were qualities which came naturally to Uncle Louis. Uncle Louis loved children, took an interest in others, and he always went down to your level when talking with you and engaging with you. His kindness and big heart were always on display in how he interacted with his children and grandchildren. And my brother and I always felt it whenever we would come and visit, which was not often enough. When we would come to visit as kids, Uncle Louis was very intuitive and always focused on my brother first, giving him a warm, celebratory greeting, entertaining him, spending time with him, and catering to his interests. My brother as a child was very interested in computers, computer games, and typing the computer programs printed in the back of magazines into the computer and getting them to run. Uncle Louis had the latest Commodore VIC-20, Commodore 64, Commodore 128, and most importantly, many computer games and magazines. And my brother was always excited to play these games together with Uncle Louis. I think Uncle Louis himself was quite a champion of these games. My brother and I both remember as little kids when we would visit, Uncle Louis would take me, my brother, and Brian on elevator rides. For us, growing up as we did in the country, visiting Co-op City felt a little magical. The magic perhaps has worn off a bit. With its tall buildings, its lights at night, and its views, riding the elevators was always very exciting for us. We would ride up and down and look around. I still have memories of Louis taking us to the top of one of the buildings, maybe his building, the 33rd floor, to see the view. Louis even picked us up and held us over the ledge. And I think that's where I learned my fear of heights. During my high school years, when I had the positive example of the Ash family to influence my growth in Yiddishkeit, Uncle Louis would attend Rabbi Solomon Berel Shul, the Young Israel of Co-op City, on high holidays and sometimes on Shabbos mornings. In later years, he was a regular attendee of Rabbi Berel Shul, helping to make the minyan when it was struggling. Though Louis's big heart was at the forefront, his sharp mind was ever present and clear. His interests included computers and technology, current events, stamps, science, and so much more. As an electrical engineer, he worked for a company in Long Island designing dashboards for aircraft. I recall talking with Louis that during his last years of employment, he was the person who literally held his team at work together, compensating for bad ideas at the top and making sure that everything stayed afloat. As a child, Uncle Louis palled around with and looked up to his brother Jaime. In fact, my mother told me that she always wanted to join them in whatever they were doing, but the boys didn't want their little sister tagging along, so my grandmother Zena bought a television for my mother to watch. Both Louis and Jaime studied electronics and electrical engineering. Now, people can correct me on the details here. It's a little foggy, but I recall Louis told me a story where he was involved with a math contest in high school in Cuba and scored at the top, and this won him some money and the opportunity to study in university in Cuba. I do not believe he pursued it, but instead he came to the US to pursue engineering together with Jaime at Brooklyn Polytech. My father tells a story that before Louis married Adela, Louis was courting two women and asked my father's opinion, which woman would be better. As we all know, Louis made the wisest possible choice in his life partner, Adela. And together with Adela's good counsel, Jewish values, and practical wisdom, Louis was blessed to raise a truly Jewish family with many Jewish grandchildren. In today's world of Jewish apathy and assimilation, his beautiful family is his greatest achievement. Louis was so devoted every day to Adela, Anita, Brian, Evie, Sela, William, and to his many grandchildren. And I know he always tried to do the right thing, and he was always there for his family all the time. In the years between 2007 and 2020, I was a proud owner of an apartment in Queens, and Louis and Adela came to me many times to visit. I had the honor of hosting them for Purim Su'udot, many Thanksgiving feasts, and occasionally for Hanukkah meals. They got to meet my older friends and relatives, Dr. and Mrs. Iskowitz, who have children, like Anita and Ari, who made Aliyah, my colleague Jay Bernstein and his children, my cousin Paul Kaplan, who is here today, Lester and Susan Kaufman, and several others. Most importantly, Louis and Adela were able to have quality time with my mother, my father, and me as a result, which is what I really wanted. And I got to eat some of Adela's cooking, which is also what I really wanted. Louis and Adela visited my mother very frequently when she was ill. And I know my mother and we were very grateful for this. This gave us a great deal of support and comfort during that difficult time. During his terrible illness, Louis was brave, dignified, upbeat, and positive. In fact, my father and I marveled at these qualities that he displayed. Uncle Louis, I will always look up to you and try to emulate your positive example of how to relate with others and treat others. I will always think of your love for us, the kind, warm way you treated us, your family. We love you and we will miss you dearly.
For about a year, I got to spend one day every week with my grandparents. As per tradition, we would start the day with breakfast at Fairway, and Bubby would then get really upset. Poppy would just start to talk and talk and talk and talk, and Poppy wouldn't eat his bagel. And Bubby would always say that Poppy's usually so quiet, but with me, he just wouldn't shut his mouth. We then drive around the New York cultural scene. We saw the various museums and art exhibits. And when I told people about my experiences with my grandparents, they'd say how nice that was of me. From their perspective, I was sacrificing my time, my interests, or whatever else I could have been doing to be with my grandparents, because that was their perspective. But for me, it couldn't be further from the truth at all. In the past year and a half, for me, and I think for a lot of us here, have been very emotionally challenging. Finding out that Poppy was sick was one of the saddest moments of my life. I was sitting in the family room and just cried. For the months after that, whenever it would come up, I would just cry. I would try to call as much that I could. I tried to call 2 or 3 times a week. I was very agitated, making sure that I'd be able to make the most out of every possible moment left. It was until my mom actually shared with me something that Brian said, that it's not the quantity of the interactions, it's the quality of them. There's not a jar that needs to constantly be added to in order to fill up. It's our qualitative experiences and our interactions. They're able to completely occupy and satisfy any open spaces. That allowed me to have somewhat of a mindset shift. Instead of rushing and attempting to reach out all the time and feeling guilty whenever we wouldn't have the chance to talk, I was able to transition to a different attitude. I was able to speak to him and have the time to be able to do that, but at the same time, I was able to reflect and think upon our relationship that we've had over my life. So over the past 5 years, I've made a very concerted effort to try to truly understand who Papi was. Many times I sat down with him and tried to learn his life story. From Cuba, the move to America, sweltering Louisiana Army service, formalizing relationships, Brooklyn Polytechnic, working as an engineer, drinking hot British beer, and like so much more. And for me, what was so unique in my own experience is I felt like I was finally able to convey my own life experience with him. And our relationship slowly started changing and transitioning. So I'm studying psychology in university, and one of the things that we learn about is the study of emotion. The idea behind emotions is that each emotion has a specific function. Each of them is to tell you something, is to signal something for you. For example, the emotion of sadness is the sign that something that's really important to you has been lost. Sadness essentially signals to us what are the things that are most valuable and precious to us. It orients us towards what lies at the core of who we are. For me, I've been having a very hard time synthesizing this idea with how I feel. On one hand, I think it's incredibly beautiful. It shows to myself how important my relationship with Papi was for me. On the other hand, this genuinely doesn't make me feel better in any way. It still really, really sucks. And truthfully, that's why I didn't understand those people that thought, when I explained at the beginning, that I was doing a service by spending my time with my grandparents. I wasn't forcing myself to do anything at all. There were genuinely not many things in my life that I would have preferred to have been doing. Being with Bubby and Papi over these past few years has been a genuine pleasure and joy. So to me, Papi's passing is not only just losing a grandfather, it feels like I've lost a friend. Thank you, Papi.
It's been a great nechama that Shlomo, Yehuda, BINYAMIN, and Tamar just flew in from Israel this morning to be here with us. Papi's brother-in-law Michael will say a couple of words.
My dear wife Mirta and I and our sons Andy and Nate spent dozens of visits with Anita and Luis at their home in Co-op City, and we had the opportunity to be with them, with Adela's amazing cooking, with Sheila and Salomon and William, her parents and cousin, 3 extraordinary individuals, and Evie, Brian, and Anita, their wonderful kids. Louis' amazing warmth, his outgoing character, his genial nature, and his extraordinary intellect were gifts not only to us and his children, but also to the entire world. Mirta and I always had Friday night dinners with her parents, Zina and Don Benito and Luis. And one Friday night, over 50 years ago, Luis said he wanted my opinion. He discussed 2 girls he was seeing. One was, quote, a teacher. She speaks 3 or 4 languages, an only child, end quote. I listened and I said, go with the one who's a teacher. You'll never regret it. Choose her and you can't go wrong. You'll be very happy. And as you can all see, the results have been a blessing. Well, Mirta and I were very happy over 50 years ago at that wedding. Louis encouraged my son Andy into computers. And thanks to Louis' influence, I took Andy to Caldor one morning and I surprised him with a brand new Commodore computer. Louis got Andy many games for the Commodore, and his insights, both mathematical and computorial, helped Andy's intellect to flourish into programming. Andy spent many, many exciting hours, often under Louis' tutoring, learning programming, using games that Louis got for him. Louis was a blessing to me, my wife Mirta, and our sons, and we will always miss him, and his insightfulness and his warmth. His voice for good and kindness reached many people, including all those who are here today, who were indeed very fortunate to know him.
Jaime and Louis were the closest of brothers throughout their lives, and I had the ultimate admiration and affection for my brother-in-law, Louis. During the times that we visited, Louis was always welcoming, gracious, and upbeat with a delightful sense of humor. He and Jaime would often talk about their shared memories growing up in Cuba. If there was anything that Jaime didn't remember, Louis would fill in the gaps. My favorite memory of Louis was when he came to California in August of 2011. The three of us went on a special trip together visiting California's natural wonders: Yosemite National Park, Mono Saltwater Lake, and Bodie Historical Gold Rush Park. We had a great time enjoying the beauty and wonder of nature and the warmth of family and friendship. Last month, I was blessed to be able to visit with Louis, and I am so grateful for the precious time that I spent with him. I will miss you, Louis. You will live on in my heart forever. Your lovely family are a testament to your devotion as a husband and father.
You know, I met Poppy when I was 17 years old as a suitor for his daughter's hand. Now, I first learned about Poppy from Anita before I ever had any meaningful personal interactions with him myself. So from Anita, I learned that Poppy had superhuman strength, was incredibly brilliant, and would do anything to protect her. Now, this might have caused some suitors to be hesitant, but Poppy never seemed to be threatening, and my intentions were, of course, always honorable. Poppy was not garrulous. He did not need to hear himself talk, nor could he possibly be overbearing. His welcoming me into the family was very natural through his warmth and joy. I found that I did not need to scale great academic, financial, or professional heights in order to win his approval. I just needed to be the person who makes his daughter happy. And then he was happy. On these very basic terms, he accepted me readily as a son. Now, don't get me wrong, he was very proud of when I succeeded, and he told me so many times. But it was also clear to me that his affection, love, and joy were clearly never dependent on it. In fact, Poppy, to me, represented a very different perspective of life success from which I was familiar. You know, recently I reflected on two perspectives of success, of heroes, by two different stories of, and our tradition of heroes. In the story of Esther, for example, the hero cavorts with kings, queens, and advisors in the palace. The stakes are high. The nation's lives hang in the balance. The future of the history of the Jewish people is at risk. The hero in the story very publicly steps into the breach. With deftness, ingenuity, and courage, Esther risks her life and saves her people. The story of Ruth, on the other hand, is very different. It's a story that does not take place on thrones, but threshing floors. Not amongst royalty, but family. Its stakes are not national, but personal. Here we read of a daughter-in-law being utterly devoted to her mother-in-law, beyond any level of expectation. A field owner who tends to a poor woman who has fallen on hard times, and a family man who redeems his cousin's lost fields, restoring his name and legacy. It's a story of day-to-day life. It's a story we would otherwise have never heard about. But the very fact that it's mentioned in the Torah, in the presence of the same scroll that contains Esther, highlights that in our tradition, there's a second way to be a hero. There's a public hero, but there's also a private one who is present at all times, who is caring, loving, and extending him or herself beyond any reasonable measure. one who is a hero to the lives of all those around him, and in the lives of whom he loves. I grew up in a family where the hero was on the center stage. We tell big stories. We have large ambitions. In my family, quiet moments of kindness and devotion were also exemplified and extolled, but their significance could at times be lost in the pomp and circumstance of grand moments. But with Poppy, his values and what was important to him were always clearly in focus. This was true throughout his life and expressed very clearly in this past year and 4 months since finding out about his illness. When the doctor told Poppy 16 months ago that he had a rare and incurable cancer, think about what would one's response be when told that you have a rare and incurable cancer. Poppy's immediate response to the doctor was that he was happy with his life. He has an amazing family. He feels very blessed. And if that's what God wants from him, he's ready. Coming from a European family who immigrated from Cuba to escape the Nazis, Poppy, being born and raised in Cuba, can never have dreamed of how his life would unfold. His self-image was not as a trailblazer, but as a younger brother to Haima, who forged a path for him to follow. As a youngster, Poppy was an excellent chess player. He excelled in school in maths and physics. He came to America, received his degree in engineering, served in the U.S. Army, and embarked on a successful career as an engineer. He was a brilliant student and a lifelong learner who filled his natural intellectual inquisitiveness with keeping current on the latest developments on his fields of interest. His life path changed forever when he met and married Adela. In her, he found the love of his life and built the context of the life that he so cherished. They located themselves around their family, living in close proximity to both of their parents. He was a totally devoted son and son-in-law. Totally devoted son and son-in-law to Grandma, to Alter Babi, and to Zaida, and a great brother to Mirta and to Haima. And together in partnership with Adela, they raised Anita, Brian, and Evie. Now, while on the surface, it might seem that he was more of a silent partner in this partnership, we who know them well know he was a rock and the backbone. Always present, always available, always with patience and joy. His family was his greatest blessing. Now, it's hard to describe in words the love that Poppy felt for his children and grandchildren, and the bond that he had with Bubby. One saw it throughout all of their lives. In these later years after he retired, they would literally spend each and every day together, going out to breakfast, being together in the apartment, watching movies and TV. Their mutual devotion and affection was the nourishment in their lives. There is no doubt that Bubby kept Poppy alive beyond what otherwise would have been the case. And there is no doubt that part of his driving life force that kept him going was that he did not want to leave your side. I've never seen anything like it. For his children and for his grandchildren, I'll just share that in these past couple of weeks, I was speaking to Poppy and talking to him about what he was thinking, both when he was present in the room with us and when his mind shifted at the end stages. Inevitably, what he would talk about is a memory of a story that he'd have with you, with his grandchildren, and with his children when they were younger. One time I listed all of the grandchildren's names and the children's names, and he smiled all throughout, giving each one a separate smile. And then he whispered to me that I'll see them from heaven. I've spent much time with Poppy since my days as a 17-year-old, talking about life, playing chess, and discussing the future. He has emerged for me not just as a father, but as a teacher and a mentor about what's important in life and how one defines life success. Of all the things that I've learned from my experiences is that, unsurprisingly, Anita was right. What she said to me back then was certainly true. Her father had superhuman strength. He was incredibly brilliant, and he'd do anything to protect her. May Papi continue from heaven to be a Melitz Yosher, to help us, to protect us, and to guide us. By living, as Brian said so beautifully, and continuing to embody his values, his strength, as Yonatan said to me in summing up, his knowledge, his strength and integrity, and most importantly, his love. Lei ben Sion, Tei Nishmato Tzura, B'tzurah HaChayim.
Slide very easy, do not let go.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that's okay.
More?
That's good. Yeah, it really was. Okay, at this point, we're going to recite Suitor Kadin. And even in our most difficult circumstance, we recognize that God's judgment is just. Papi said it himself. Ve'en lahera charmida shavtecha tzedika ta Adonai v'yoshem mishpatecha dayan emet shofet tzedek ve'emet baruch dayan ha'emet shekol mishpatav tzedek v'yemet nefesh kolcha b'yadecha tzedek mo'a yimincha b'yadecha rachem al pleita son yodecha v'tomar l'malach harif yadecha gadol ha'itza rov l'leya she'necha b'kuchot kol darchei b'nei adam atei li'ish kedracha b'chafri ma'ala v'agik yishar Adonai tzri b'vasabo.
במעלות קדושים וטהורים כזוהר הרקיע מהירים ומזהירים את לב בן ציון שהלך לעולמו בעבור שכולנו מתפללים לעילוי נשמתו בגן עדן תהי מנוחתו ברוכן בעל רחמים יסתירהו בסתר כנפו עולמים יצרו החיים נתן נשמתו אדוני שלום על המשכבות ונאמר אמן.